What are some of the projects and bands you're doing, and what's some of the music you're listening to that's inspiring you these days?
Let's see. Well, in terms of music I'm listening to, I'm actually not listening to much. If I listen to anything, it's either some gigs that I've done, or that I've been on other people's gigs, or maybe a recording that I was on or something. Just like critically listening like that, but not so much critical / leisure listening. Some a little bit, just pointed little things, but nothing really consistent. Partially because, as your situation is, my time is limited, and I don't really have time to just chill and listen. And I usually don't bring anything on the road with me. I haven't actually had a Walkman or and I don't have a laptop or anything like that for years.
So, no iPod?
No iPod, nothing like that. I'm totally low tech.
But I know what you mean. I mean, I'm not listening to a lot either for the kinds of reasons that I did when I was in high school, college, and soon after in recent years. A lot of times, what I really enjoy doing is playing music for people in classes where I've been doing a lot of substitute teaching, like at Purchase and places like that, or with students. I'll be like, check out this Art Tatum or this Clark Terry solo, and so it's like a revisitation for me of certain principles that I love. But yeah, and it's. I mean, I find it a challenge. Do you find it a challenge sometimes when you're so confronted with, well, I'm releasing this project or this record, and I've got to listen to like a whole bunch of it, kind of like what I just did with the website. I had to listen to the record and get that figured out. And then a live concert download, and I, after like 6 weeks of listening to myself critically, man, I feel like I need to be whisked away to some kind of mental ward, even more than normally. So,
I hear you. But
it's good to. I mean, do you find the need to get out of that headspace as well?
I do, but you know what? I haven't really been in it in terms of listening to my own projects, that I haven't done one in years. So.
And may I just interject?
Please.
If that is not an artistic crime against nature, I don't know what is. If I sell some real estate and get some money and become a record company mogul and start a label, you are my man. You are my. Let me just kind of state at this point. I first met you. I guess we were playing in. It was a Jeff Keezer, Kenny Rampton, Steve Armour big band in like late '94.
Yeah, I remember that. I do actually remember that.
We both soloed on Softly.
Exactly. I remember that. I do remember that. Strange thing to remember, but...
Well, because I was sitting next to you. Well, I know I made a memorable impression personally, because I don't think we said a word at the 2 or 3 rehearsals. It was just kind of like, hi.
Right.
And as I've sort of maybe said it, either the microphone was on or off, I'm not sure. I mean, you tend to be a rather quiet fellow, so the idea of getting you to do an interview, I got a big kick out of that idea, just that line. But I think I barely heard you play at the rehearsals, and then we played Softly's in the Morning Sunrise, and we finished the take, and I just looked over at you and said something like, "Holy shit, man! Like, who are you and where are you from?" And like, wow, And I just knew the first time I heard you that you were like really one of the special improvisers in the world. And it's funny. People say things like that. It's real difficult sometimes to put things of meaning into words and not have them sound corny or overly done or whatever. But by the way, Helena's cookies are killing.
I told you, man. They're the bomb, right?
Oh my God.
On, man.
Wheat allergy aside, I just had to plow on and heroically in spite of it all, because this is just so good.
They're totally crunchy too.
Oh, man.
All whole wheat flour, man. No white flour.
God bless her. So, and the tea is great too. Real Turkish Ceylon tea.
That's right, man.
But
it's the combo.
All right, so let's back up a little bit. Or actually, before we do, there was an article I didn't see, but I heard about in the Times like about a year ago. It was a big feature on you. Who did that? Was that Ratliff?
Oh, Ratliff. Yeah, that was a few years back.
Okay.
He did this, some feature thing.
Yeah.
So,
How did you feel about that?
Well, I have mixed feelings about any of those things. On an objective level, it's good to have something written about you, and if it's generally favorable in an objective sense, that's nice, and it's good for myself, it's good for my family,
Right.
I think it's good for me, helps them, so I'm into it. That's
Good.
great. You know, I feel good about it in that sense. Subjectively, it's I kind of take all those things with maybe even more than a grain of salt. You know, it's some guy's opinion, and even his opinion can change with the wind. Sorry to say, like all of them, and also since they're writers, you know, their knowledge of the music, in terms of people that I respect who are musicians who really know what the music. Is minimal, I hate to say, frankly, compared to yours or anyone else I know. So what they say about it doesn't really mean that much to me, because in terms of what my goals and the criteria which someone can judge, theirs is quite low to me in comparison to my comrades. So, you know, it's just another article which does general good for me and for others, so fine.
Yeah.
But I don't take it that seriously, to be honest.
Right.
So,
well, I hate to see these people that act as if, or say things like, "Oh, nothing's happened since like 1965."
right.
That could not be more wrong.
Oh, definitely. Especially our generation. You know, all the stuff that all of us are doing. I totally disagree vehemently. You know, there's so much happening. I think that the music is really going. I have to say, I was going to say that a deeper level, not deeper than the past. What I'm saying is that deeper in the sense that it's becoming more, how can I say, I had some words for this earlier on. It's kind of like, in a sense that there's a period of exploration, let's say 60s through 70s in particular, and then sort of consolidation or reconstruction. Consolidation maybe in the 80s, a lot of that. Then the 90s, it seems like, we came through that, right? And I think we sort of have a overview, of what happened in, let's say, from the 80s all the way back. And I think many of us are less concerned with schools of thought in terms of, let's say, whether you play free or avant-garde or really straight ahead or this or that. I think most of us just see all of those traditions equally, in the sense that, for example, even many critics now will think of, let's say, if something is more on the free side, they'll think of it literally as avant-garde, as in that's the music of the future or whatever, and something that might be more clear forms or rigid harmonic constructions of some type, mainstream, whatever you want to call it, may not be considered as forward-thinking. Where I think many of us think, those two schools of thought are already 30 years old in a sense.
Right.
And they're equal as far as many of us are concerned, right? I mean, they're both things that have happened, two traditions, and we can equally take as we want from them. So, I think that alone is a difference from the past. And we're putting together music's a wide, 100 years of music in and outside of jazz, of the North American forms, that I think wasn't really put together in the way it is now among, all of us. So, and I think many critics are missing it. They just can't hear it, to be honest. Yeah. Most of the people that understand it are in our generation, musicians and not musicians. A lot of people that come to hear us, I mean us in a larger sense, are young people, So,
one thing I want to kind of address with you that I've always felt was something that shaped what you're doing is, you talked about meditation. Something you've done a lot over the years. I just wondered if you could speak to that a bit.
Just doing it, or what do you mean in terms of how it affects music, or
how
specifically?
How you found it? How you found that it was something that was helpful for you, and then how it affects you?
Oh yeah, well, I've been more consistent about it in other times, and sometimes more than others. But basically, I practice it from a Buddhist tradition, so I don't. It's not a secular tradition, just meditating, just for that alone. But so there's the whole philosophy behind it. But meditating and the philosophy or dharma behind it has also helped me. One, not to be too shaken by the ups and downs of events. It's just the nature of the world. Gotcha. So what so and so says about the music, or whether someone loves it or hates it. If you're sitting here, like let's say for you, there are going to be a certain amount of people that love what you do and love you, a certain amount of people that hate what you do, and a certain amount of people who are totally ignorant of you and don't even know who you are. And that's always going to be the case, no matter what, right, from the beginning to the end of your life. So worrying about how much you can have control over so and so who hates or loves you or doesn't care about you is totally unnecessary and irrelevant. Right. So it teaches you all these various things about that, just about following your path and not worrying about all the ups and downs, and being concerned about what you're owed or what you're not owed, justice or injustice, all this other stuff. Yeah. So, but the main thing about meditation is that for me it helps me to it just basically calms the waters, and it helps you to understand a little bit more about your own mind. And then in the course of when you're doing something, I find that as I've done it more and more, I become less distracted. Even when I'm talking to someone, less distracted by this thought or looking over at this, or this color reminds me of when I was back in so-and-so in such a place, and then the story goes on and on. Right. Same thing when you're playing music. When you're not playing, there aren't a bunch of thoughts going on or worries or anything. You're just playing music, just getting into sound. Or if you're doing something that has to do with some sense. So in general, in Buddhism, there's 6 senses that are considered. So that's the 5 senses that we normally think about, and then the 6th is the mind. I was just starting to ask you about your family and kind of bringing it around to, where you come from, and just if you could speak to that a little bit. Just in general, where they're from, where my family's from, or where you grew up, and talk maybe a little bit, if you'd like, about your grandfather that you wrote the song for. So. Okay, yeah, my let's see, my family's from Louisiana. My father's side of family, my biological father's side of family, and my mother's side of family is from the Midwest, from Indiana, Ohio area. What part of Indiana? I think from Gary, and also, what's the other town? It's a very small town. Would it possibly be Kokomo? No. Well, Kokomo, too. My mother's side of the family is all from Kokomo. Oh, wow. Yeah. There's Kokomo, and there's another town, too. Okay. Cool. My mother's side of the family's from. So, it'll come to me in a little bit. Anyway, so, there, and then, I grew up in LA mostly. I lived in a few different places from 1 to 4, because my natural father was in the military. He died when I was about 1.5. Oh, I'm sorry. And then, I'm only mentioning to make this story clear. But anyway, so then my mother remarried when I was about 4 or whatever, and moved to California, and I grew up in LA. I see. So, was your dad, was he in Vietnam? He actually didn't end up going. He was in the military, and he was about to go. Okay. And he was in a plane crash. So, wow. But yeah, they were about to go. So he was a navigator, engineer. So anyway, and my maternal grandfather, the one that I wrote the song for, Yam Yam, I called him Yam Yam because he called me the Yam Yam Man, so that's how that name stuck when I was a kid. And so he was an aviator from when he was a teenager. Maybe, I forgot when he bought his first plane. I think he was 16 or 17 or something. Wow.
That's
so
kind
that
of
was in the
amazing.
early 30s. Yeah, he was very into it.
How did he have the
Super
money
driven
at that
guy.
age to buy a plane?
He's a super driven guy. He died a multimillionaire.
Wow.
Yeah, and he started out, he was born, I guess, working class, not very affluent or anything. He's a bad guy. Seriously, like.
That's incredible.
So anyway, he worked, he had a motorcycle too. He was a kind of a daredevil dude as well. So, I forgot what job he had, but he saved money and he bought a plane.
Wow.
So he flew in that time period in the late 20s, early 30s when flying was kind of a new thing, and it was freer, I think, then. So he flew for, once he had his plane, he also made money by doing, at fairs, they used to have, someone with an airplane who would do aerobatics and things. So he would do that.
It occurs to me as an African American during that time,
Right.
being that flying was so new,
Right.
he must have been kind of a trailblazer in that sense as well. I mean, I would imagine.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the few and first.
Mm-hmm.
And also just to be able to do it. In other words, as you can imagine during that time, obviously the difficulties like, you can't fly in this field, you can't take this plane here, you can't do, all these obstacles,
Right.
obviously. So, but he did it anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and he got people to allow him to fly where most would not be able to. So anyway, so he continued, and eventually he became. He also became an engineer to some extent. In other words, later on he started building his own planes. So when I was a kid growing up, I used to go and we'd always fly, and he was always building a new plane of his own.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd make models,
Wow.
and then he'd go out and fly. He usually had the car in the garage and a plane that he was working on the garage too.
Incredible.
So always welding and stuff and making planes. Yeah, man.
Did you
I took
learn?
it for granted. I didn't.
Did you learn how to do a lot
No.
of things like that?
I just knew about airplanes.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't really learn how to fly. That's a lot if you actually learn to do that. But,
Right.
I just knew about aviation and planes.
And where was he living at that point when you go and visit him?
He lived in Xenia, Ohio.
Okay.
My grandparents lived ever since I was around. They lived there until they died.
Mm-hmm.
So both of them are gone now.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so he was doing that his entire life, and he was also an educator. So he made his living by education. So he's president of, I think it was president of Sinclair University, and maybe vice president of, I forgot, of which university. Anyway, so that was his thing with that. And then during World War II, he was one of the flight instructors for basically it was, I forgot the name of it actually, but it was the division of African American, I guess it was the Army, Army Air Force at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was one of the flight instructors for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the first black people that were allowed to fly in combat.
Incredible.
So he taught them to fly, as well as a few other instructors as
Mm-hmm.
well. So that was written for him. So that's who he was, more or less.
And is there any relation? I don't know, but the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, is that was your grandfather? Is that the same?
That's what it is.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. I spaced forgot. No, that was it. So he was at Tuskegee, and
Did you see the movie?
that's where my mother was born there too.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
But did you see?
I didn't see the movie. I saw part of it. I
Yeah.
didn't see I don't think I saw the whole thing.
I've seen part of it too. I just saw part of it recently, and it reminded me
Right.
of that.
Yeah. Yeah. He was there. He was one of the people.
You know, what's interesting when you mentioned about it was your mom's side of the family. You said
Yeah.
it was in that area of Indiana.
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a story I told, I think probably on one of the lectures or journal entries. You know, there's so much content on this website.
Mm-hmm.
And I think somewhere halfway
Right.
through I said, I know no one will ever hear this or see all this stuff about. I mean, it's like more stuff than you'd ever want to know about any human being in your life. But somewhere in there, I talked about, my mother married a jazz musician and lived in L.A. in the early to mid 50s.
Wow.
And I don't know if she came to L.A. and met him there. His name was Bob Gordon. I told you the story, right?
I don't know if you did.
He was a baritone player who was on Clifford Brown's first record called Clifford Brown and His West Coast Side. He's on the original recording of Joy Spring and Dowwood. That was with arrangements by Jack Montrose. Jack was his best friend.
Wow.
And they had a two-saxophone band, the Bob Gordon Quintet with him and Jack and Shelley Mann and different people that Red Mitchell knew. A lot of people, Barney Kessel, all those cats.
Wow.
Anyway, but so you started on clarinet, and then when did you get into saxophone?
Then I moved to alto around middle school or something, then tenor in high school,
Yeah. I'd love to hear some Mark Turner alto shit, man. That's going to be
You don't want to hear that. Definitely not back then. And I can't play it now at all. So, just that, and, it's the usual thing. There's a stage band, and the whole LA stage band thing, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that was happening. And I don't think that happened in the East Coast as much.
Not as much.
So the West Coast and the Midwest, there's a big jazz educator big band thing. It's a whole nother level.
It's really strange.
It's very strange.
Now, let me ask you this. When I got to college...
The only reason I knew, just to say, the only reason I actually really knew something about, I wouldn't say I really knew, but I heard about who some of the fathers of this music were because of my parents, not because of that.
I know.
They just sleeped on so many people they wouldn't even mention. I'm like, never mentioned Duke Ellington, Miles.
Right.
Nothing about Train or Sonny Rollins.
Let me ask you two big people that I'm sure they talked about. Stan Kenton.
That's right.
And Maynard Ferguson.
There you go.
What I mostly find it is frustrating and annoying, and it needs to be more about the music.
Yeah, absolutely.
and not about, some of the things you said about a conscious choice of Maynard Ferguson, who was like a great friend to my mom and Bob, who was, a very nice man.
No, nothing against this
Exactly.
Absolutely. He's great too. But
exactly.
What about the others that
Yeah, I mean, if
created him.
I was actually very encouraged when I saw that you were working at Manhattan School of Music for a time.
That was a little bit, yeah, it was a few years, maybe 7 years ago.
Was it that long ago? Yeah.
I think it was like 98.
Yeah.
Actually.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind doing something like that again, but actually one other point about that, a little bit, is that, first of all, at least in California, at least with some of that adjudicator, whatever you call it, that format, I forgot what it's called, there's a name for it actually in California, but anyway, one is, I was just surprised how little was mentioned of, various people that should have been mentioned on various instruments.
Right.
Or even if you're playing big band, they might mention Count Basie, never Duke Ellington.
Right.
And plenty of other bands that I won't even say we all know there, not even mentioned, not once, nothing at all. Playing, this is a big band here, so why not just, not even a listening session? Like, okay, you're at these little collegiate and high school festivals. Okay, how about a listening class? A half hour, 10 minutes. These are the records you should listen to. You can buy them here, or we'll give them to you.
Amen.
And
that's exactly right.
It doesn't even have to be that long, just a little bit.
That's what I do when I go to these colleges. That's what I want to do is play music for these people because they haven't heard it.
They're playing, and then you get on you have a tape recording. You're supposed to make comments while they're playing about blah blah blah. You should do this, blah blah blah. All this stuff, time, blah blah blah, all this mess, right? So first of all, I totally disagree with it. Partially just because I was in those things and I didn't learn anything from it, not from the comments, from just playing the bands. So anyway, then you go in and later on you have to make comments to a specific band, right? So I didn't know that it was happening. For example, I went to the gig and I didn't know that we were going to be doing some kind of education as well. If I'd known, I would have refused, or have said, I'd like to be involved, but I'm not going to do this. Anyway, so I was thrown into it, and I said, well, okay, I'll try and do something. So anyway, basically what happened is, so I was in with one of the bands, starting to talk to them, and first of all, I said, okay, first of all, the trio, in other words, and first of all, that they didn't know what I was talking about, so I said the piano trio, piano, bass, drums, you guys need to do such and such, just to get together. If you guys aren't together, the rest of the band's not going to be happy.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. And then I said something about the bass and drums, all these things. So they had no idea what I was. It's totally off in space.
Right.
And the band director had never even said anything to them about what a piano trio is or anything like that. So, blah, blah, blah. We go through all these issues. And plenty of things that I expected them to know. Because I thought this guy was leading a jazz band. So I just went straight to the point about certain things. So basically then a letter comes back later about, I don't know if it was me, probably me, but about, you know, what a jazz education is, blah, 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 and about all these things. And then he says, for example, he uses the example that I was talking to the piano trio, part of the band, and he said he had to tell them what a piano trio was. Well, first of all, if you hadn't told him until that point, then what were you doing for the whole year in the band? With
Right.
the big band.
Right.
So what's the deal? Anyway, so I mean, it was just out, you know. I would have sat them down and just said, okay, listen, you guys need to listen to these things. Not dealt with any of the charts because all the bands sounded the same. They had the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was just out. Like, no one just... There's so many things... I mean, I shouldn't say just a few things that could have been done that would have made all those bands sound better. Just a few simple things.
Yeah.
You know, once a week listen to a little music, read a little history, you know, just the rhythm section, just play together. The piano player just learn how to play some voicings and just comp a little bit, just get a feel. Just simple things, you know.
Yeah.
No one said anything to him about it. Nothing.
Well, the one thing I always do about I'm right there with you.
What is this, man?
Well, it's what happens when people that don't know a whole lot about music start teaching it. So you were saying about trying to work with those folks on their terms?
Oh, I was just trying to work with them on their terms, since, you know, the whole thing was trying to get their charts to sound better.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And it just didn't make any sense to me, you know.
Yeah.
It's basically the same things you were saying. When you just throw all that stuff out, just work on time.
Yep.
Play quarter notes. Some given rhythm like you were using there. The whole band just play it. That's it. Just do that.
Yep.
Get that together.
Forget about chops, forget about technique, forget about trying to impress anybody, just time and feel.
And forget about trying to play these, you know, weird collegiate charts written by somebody. I hate
exactly. No, you're dead on.
You know, what is that mess,
You're dead on.
I mean,
I love it. Mark Turner is going off. He is setting down. I'm just loving this shit, man. The world must see the other side of the stoic Buddhist monk. What is that mess?